Don't you love when the average, when the views just get one and then the second afterwards it immediately plummets to 0? I love when that happens. And I love when no one joins my streams. Well, I'm going to say it. 6, 7. Yeah, yeah. Now we're going to get more people. Because I said 6, 7. Okay, I should actually stop saying that. But come on, we need more people. Come on. Yeah, we definitely need more people. Time to more advertise a little more, even on YouTube. Because usually I don't advertise on YouTube. You know what? Create post. I want to say. Now to delete the old video because I have had the right to do so. Also, yay! Happy 30 subscribers to me! But anyways, we still need to do more work. Also, yes, I really heavily suggest that you fart on stream while I'm reading. Because if you fart on stream, you will interrupt me on every sexual part and yeah, well not sexual, well probably sexual, but There's nothing happening. I finally got the wildfire in my sock jar under control. Out of the ordinary, I mean. Hey Garfield, I got your text. Where do you want where do you want me? Inside me, John. Project. This my project. Next time I'm gonna mute because it's gonna be embarrassing when this gets on the thing. I just wanna watch the memes while yeah, memes time. I am back from the memes. Now let's see how many viewers we got so far. None! 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 Again. Can't you believe this? There's no one! It is time to watch more memes. Off camera. 15 more minutes. Hey, hello. How's it going? We still got nobody yet. Hell yeah. Don't you love when there's absolutely nobody on your streams and you took all this effort to prepare all this for your stream? Like, look at the background. The it has a sort of code, but if not for the pink chair, it would be visible. The pink chair was intended for a guest, but I never like brought up that guest ever. So rare chance we'll see him until the end of March break. Anyways, before I start the stream, I just want to say, in my Minecraft world, I have successfully made a level 18 steam engine in with the create mod. So basically, I made a biofuel farm which takes the seeds from my wheat farm, turn that into seed oil, and then make put the seed oil into the basins with the sticks that my tree farm produces, and then combine that and it makes biofuel, well, biomass. And then you combine the biomass with cinder flour and sugar from the sugarcane farm. The cinder flour comes from crushing netherrack. Mix that up and you get yourself some biofuel. Enhance, enchant those the mixers and the press, and you get better appliances going faster. But yeah, basically, after that, I connect that to a fluid transmitter, which transports fluid from one point to another at any point, and then it connects to the blaze burners that do the in the boiler. And with that, with that much throughput, every every the belts were filled, and the mixers had to like probably get an upgrade. But anyways, yeah, I could successfully say that the it could produce a lot of biofuel. So yeah, now I can hold the whopping 294,700 something stress units within 18 engines. And that's how you play with the create mod. 5 more minutes. Will anyone join? Will anybody join? Absolutely no one. This is amazing. I love when no one joins my streams and then like 5 minutes before it starts. Oh hey, it's 5 minutes before it starts. That means there will be maybe someone joining. But if no one joins, that's alright. Because I know that there will be people watching from like post stream. There will be people watching. Just like to catch up on stuff. And now I wonder, is that specific time way too early? Probably. But yeah. 4 more minutes. 4 more minutes. 4 more minutes. 3 more minutes. And Linux. And no one again. Only 2 people. If anyone is watching this, please advertise this because I took a little, like, I spent every single 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. reading 1984 for the people on YouTube. And yeah. And again, stream doesn't fully start until the transition's complete. Right now it's not. When it is, then it starts. No, it's not complete. It is not complete. Neither is this. Because look. One more minute. Can we get a single view or not? Because after that, I will have to speak differently, also known as in a serious way. I shall prepare the ebook. Can we get it one more? One person? One person? Can this even load? I'm clicking the party emoji on my own stream. Welcome everybody to me reading 1984. It is 8 p.m. That means it is time to read 1984. But yeah, so last time, um, do I have that much of a short-term memory? But anyways, yeah, so last time, I don't know what I don't exactly recall what happened, but we saw a little bit of what Newspeak was, like what the good, the plus good, the double plus good and stuff like that. More into Winston's job and a little more of the situation of like what we know is that Winston is aware that he may be vaporized. And yeah, chapter 6 is so just a little warning for those who are watching that are not like into. So chapter 6 may include some stuff that may not be suitable for all ages. So if you want to mute this stream, I'll indicate if you want to mute this stream, feel free to do so. And I won't be bothered because like yeah, I don't want to ruin anyone's innocence. Just let's begin. When I tell you there will be something, then I suggest muting your stream temporarily, and yeah. Chapter 6. Winston was writing in his diary. It's best to mute at this time, I think. It was 3 years ago. It was a dark evening in a narrow side street near one of the big railway stations. She was standing near a doorway in the wall, under a street lamp that hardly gave any light. She had a young face, painted very thick. It was really the paint that appealed to me. The whiteness of it, like a mask, and the bright red lips. Party women never paint their faces. There was nobody else in the street, and no telescreens. She said $2. Okay, you may unmute. Oh, all right. You can't unmute when you can't note when I. You know what? Let's just go on. Muters, stay muted. For the moment it was too difficult to go on. He shut his eyes and pressed his fingers against them, trying to squeeze out the vision that kept recurring. He had an almost overwhelming temptation to shout a string of filthy words at the top of his voice, or to bang his head against the wall, to kick over the table and hurl the ink pots through the window, to do any violent or noisy or painful thing that might black out the memory that was tormenting him. Your worst enemy, he reflected, was your own nervous system. At any moment, the tension inside you was liable to translate it itself into some visible symptom. He thought of a man whom he had passed in the street a few weeks back. A quite ordinary-looking man, a party member, not agreed, aged 35 to 40, tallish and thin, carrying a briefcase. They were a few meters apart when the left side of the man's face was suddenly hang on, contorted by a sort of spasm. It happened again just as they were passing up one another. It was only a twitch, a quiver, not a quaver, a quiver, rapid as the clicking of a camera shutter, but obviously habitual. He remembered thinking at the time, that poor devil is done for, and what was frightening was that the action was quite possibly unconscious. The most deadly danger of all was talking in your sleep. There was no way of guarding against that, so far as he could see. He drew his breath and went on writing. I went with her through the doorway and across a backyard into a basement kitchen. There was a bed against the wall, and a lamp on the table, turned down very low. She His teeth were set on the edge. He would have liked to spit. Simultaneously, with the woman in the basement kitchen, he thought of Catherine, his wife. Winston was married, had been married at any rate. Probably he still was married, so far as he knew his wife was not dead. He seemed to breathe again, the warm, stuffy odor of the basement kitchen. An odor compounded of bugs and dirty clothes, clothes and villainous cheap scent, but nevertheless alluring because no woman of the party ever used scent, or could be imagined as doing so. Only the proles used scent. In his mind, the smell of it was inextricably mixed up with fornication. When he had gone with that woman, it had been his first lapse in 2 years or thereabouts. Consorting with prostitutes was forbidden, of course, but it was one of those rules that you could occasionally nerve yourself to break. It was dangerous, but it was not a life and death matter. To be caught with a hang what's a prostitute again? Oh, 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 bleep. Might mean 5 years in a forced labor camp, not more if you had committed no other offense. And it was easy enough, provided that you could avoid being caught in the act. The poorer quarters swarmed with women who were ready to bleep. Some could even be purchased bleep for a bottle of gin, which the pros were not supposed to drink. Technically, the party was even inclined to encourage bleep as an outlet for instincts which could not be altogether suppressed. Mere what now? Debauchery. Bad or immoral behavior. Mere bleep did not matter very much, so long as it was furtive and joyless and only involved the women of a submerged and despised class. The unforgivable crime was bleep between party members. But though this was one of the crimes that the accused in the Great Purges invariably confessed to, it was difficult to imagine any such thing actually happening. The aim of the party was not merely to prevent men and women from forming loyalties which it might not be able to control. Its real undeclared purpose was to remove all bleep from the bleep. Not love so much as Bleep was the enemy, inside marriage as well as outside it. All marriages between party members had to be approved by a committee appointed for the purpose, and though the principle was never clearly stated, permission was always refused if the couple concerned gave the impression of being physically attracted to one another. The only recognized purpose of marriage was to beget children for the service of the party. Bleep was to be looked as a slightly disgusting minor operation, like having bleep. This again was never put into plain words, but in an indirect way it was rubbed into every party member from childhood onwards. There were even organizations, such as the Junior Anti-Bleep League, which advocated complete bleep for both sexes. This time, this word I can actually mention it. Gender and sex are actually different. Sex is the gender where you were born, is the gender that you were born, and the gender is what you are currently. Like for example, the trans people example if someone was born a man, but they could but they could be a female. But wait, there are if they were a female, then that means that their sex would still be male because they were born as a male in that time. Not to be confused with that pers person who may have made a mistake in their policies, which backfired into making everyone female. Anyways, all children off the mic cut off, and there's still barely anyone. Hello? Yeah, there's still barely anyone. All children were to be were to be born by artificial insem what? So basically just some even more sex. Thank you! Thank you very much! Anyways, Artsem as it was called in Newspeak, and brought up in public institutions. This, Winston was aware, was not meant altogether seriously, but somehow it fitted with the general ideology of the party. The party was trying to kill the bleep instinct, or, if it could not be killed, then to distort it and dirty it. He did not know why this was so, but it seemed natural that it should be so, and as far as the women were concerned, the party's efforts were largely successful. He thought again of Catherine. It must be 9, 10, nearly 11 years since they had parted. It was curious how seldom he thought of her. For days at a time, he was capable of forgetting that he had ever been married. They had only been together for about 15 months. The party did not permit divorce, but it rather encouraged separation in cases where there were no children. Come on, machine, machine. Catherine was a tall, fair-haired girl, very straight with splendid movements. She had a bold, a what what face? What face? Like an eagle. Aquiline face, a face that one might have called noble until one discovered that there was as nearly as possible nothing behind it. Very early in her married life, he had decided, through perhaps it was only that he knew her more intimately than he knew most people, that she had without exception the most stupid, vulgar, empty mind that he had ever encountered. She had not a thought in her head that was not a slogan, and there was no imbecility, absolutely none that she was not capable of swallowing if the party handed that out to her. The human soundtrack he'd nicknamed her in his own mind. Yet he could not have endured living with her if it had not been for just one thing. As soon as he touched her, she seemed to wince and stiffen. To embrace her was like embracing a jointed wooden image. And what was strange was that even when she what, what was clasping him against her, he had the feeling that she was simultaneously pushing him away with all her strength. The rigidity of her muscles managed to convey that impression. She would lie there with shut eyes, neither resisting nor cooperating, but submitting. It was extraordinarily embarrassing, and after a while horrible. But even dead, he could have borne living with her if it had been agreed that they should remain celibate. I can actually say that this time. But curiously enough, it was Catherine who refused this. They must, she said, produce a child if they could. So the performance continued to happen, once a week quite regularly, whether it was not impossible. She even used to remind him of it in the morning, as something which had to be done that evening and which must not be forgotten. She had two names for it. One was making a baby, and the other was our duty to the party. Yes, she had actually used that phrase. Quite soon he grew to have a feeling of positive dread when the appointed day came round, but luckily no child appeared, and in the end she agreed to give up trying, and soon afterwards they parted. Winston sighed inaudibly. He picked up his pen again and wrote. She threw herself down on the bed and at once, without any kind of preliminary, in the most coarse, horrible way you could imagine. Bleep, 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 bleep. I He saw himself standing there in the dim lamplight, with the smell of bugs and cheap scent in his nostrils, and in his heart a feeling of defeat and resentment, which even at the moment was mixed up with the thought of Catherine's white body, frozen forever by the hypnotic power of the party. Why did it always have to be like this? Why could he not have a woman of his own instead of these filthy scuffles at intervals of years? But a real love affair was an almost unthinkable event. The women of the party were all alike. Ch what now? Chastity was as deep ingrained in them as party loyalty. By careful early conditioning, by games and cold water, by the rubbish that was dinned into them at school and in the spies and the youth league, by lectures, parades, songs, slogans, and martial music, the natural feeling had been driven out of them. His reason told him that there must be exceptions, but his heart did not believe it. They were all impregnable, as the party intended that they should be. And what he wanted, more even than to be loved, was to break down that wall of virtue, even if it were only once in his whole life. The act, successfully performed, was rebellion. Desire was thought crime. Even to have awakened Catherine, if he could have achieved it, it would be like a seduction. I can say that because Team Fortress 2 said it. Seduce me. Although she was his wife. But the rest of the story has got to be written down. He wrote, I turned up the lamp. When I saw the light after the darkness, the feeble light of the paraffin lamp had seemed very bright. For the first time he could ever see the woman properly. He had taken a step towards her and then halted, full of lust and terror. He was painfully conscious of the risk he had taken in coming here. It was a perfectly possible that the patrols would catch him on the way out, for that matter, that might be waking outside the door at this moment if he went away without even doing what he had got to do. It it had got to be written down. It had got to be confessed. What he had suddenly seen in the lamplight was that the woman was old. The paint was plastered so thick on her face that it looked as though it might crack like a cardboard mask. There were streaks of white in her hair, but the truly dreadful detail was that her mouth had fallen a little open, revealing nothing except the cavernous blackness. She had no teeth at all. He wrote hurriedly, in scrabbling handwriting. When I saw her in the light, she was quite an old woman, 50 years at least, but I went ahead and did it just the same. He pressed his fingers against his eyelids again. He had written it down at last, but it made no difference. The therapy had not worked. The urge to shoot filthy words at the top of his voice was as strong as ever. And that was chapter 6. And the people are actually coming in at the right time because we actually finished the parts where the bad parts, not the bad parts by like it went downhill, but the bad parts by not family friendly. But phew, thank goodness that part's over. Now it's time for the break time. Hell yeah! It's time for 3 minutes. And we are back. Yeah, so sorry, I just had to do stuff. But anyways, just quick stuff. Now, as we read from chapter 6, the thing that they mention a lot, they said that it was like some sort of like rebellion or something. So like the freedom to experience something was to fight against the freedom is slavery part. So yeah, let us continue into chapter 7. It'll last like a half an hour, so we will have time to read chapter 7. Oh yeah, did I mention chapter 8? Then chapter after this one will be like the entire stream long and the last chapter. So I'll better make this one extra special. Anyways, let us begin again. If there is hope, wrote Winston, it lies in the proles. If there was hope, it must lie in the proles, because only those in swarming disregarded masses, 85% of the population of Oceania, could the force to destroy the party ever be generated. The party could not be overthrown from within. Its enemies, if it had any enemies, had no way of coming together or even identifying one another. Even if the legendary Brotherhood existed, as just possibly it might, It was inconceivable that its members could ever assemble in larger numbers than twos and threes. Rebellion meant a look in the eyes, an inflection of the voice, at most, an occasional whispered word. But the proles, if only they could somehow become conscious of their own strength, would have no need to conspire. They needed only to rise up and shake themselves, like a horse shaking off flies. If they chose, they could blow the party to pieces tomorrow morning. Surely, sooner or later, it must occur to do it. It must occur them to do it. And yet, he remembered how once he had been walking down a crowded street when a tremendous shout of hundreds of voices, women's voices, had burst from a side street a little way ahead. It was a great formidable cry of angry despair, a deep, loud that went humming on like the reverberation of a bell. His heart had leapt. It started, he had thought. A riot! The pros are breaking loose. At last! When he had reached the spot it was to see a mob or two, or 300 women crowding round the stalls of a street market, with faces as tragic as though they had been the doomed passengers on a sinking ship. But at this moment the general despair broke down into a multitude of individual quarrels. It appeared that one of the stalls had been selling 10 saucepans. They were wretched flimsy things, but cooking pots of any kind were always difficult to get. Now the supply had unexpectedly given out. The successful women, bumped and jol- jostled by the rest, were trying to make off with their saucepans, while dozens of others clamored round the stall, accusing the stall-keeper of favoritism and of having more saucepans somewhere in reserve. There was a fresh outburst of yells. Two bloated women, one of them with her hair coming down, had got hold of the same saucepan and were trying to tear it out of one of another's hands. For a moment they were both tugging, and then the handle came off. Winston watched them disgustedly, and yet just for a moment what almost frightening power had sounded in that cry from only a few hundred throats. Why was it that they could never shout like that about anything that mattered? He wrote, "Until they become conscious, they will never rebel, and until after they had rebelled they cannot become conscious." That, he reflected, might almost have been a transcription from one of the party textbooks. The party claimed, of course, to have liberated the proles from bondage. Before the revolution, they had been hideously oppressed by the capitalists. They had been starved and flogged. Women had been forced to work in the coal mines. Women still did work in the coal mines, as a matter of fact. Children had been sold into the factories at age of 6, but simultaneously, true to the principles of doublethink, the parties taught that the proles were natural inferiors who must be kept in subjection like animals by the application of a few simple rules. In reality, very little was known about the proles. It was not necessary to know much. So long as they continued to work and breed, their other activities were without importance. Left to themselves, like cattle turned loose upon the plains of Argentina. I was about to say Argentina, but yeah, it would be an insult to Argentina, probably. They had reverted to a style of life that appeared to be natural to them, a sort of an ancestral pattern. They were born, they grew up in the gutters, they went to work at 12. They passed through a brief blossoming period of beauty and desire. They married at 20, they were middle-aged. At 30, they died for the most part at 60. Heavy physical work, the care of home and children, petty quarrels with neighbors, films, footballs, beer, and above all, gambling filled up the horizon of their minds. Let's go gambling! Oh, dang it! Oh, dang it! Oh, dang it! To keep them in control was not difficult. A few agents of the thought police moved always among them, spreading false rumors and marking down and eliminating the few individuals who were just capable of becoming dangerous. But no attempt was made to indoctrinate with them with the ideology of the party. It was not desirable that the pros should have strong political feelings. All that was required of them was a primitive patriotism, which could be appealed to whether it was necessary to make them accept longer working hours or shorter rations. And even when they become discontented, as they sometimes did, their discontent led to nowhere. Because being without general ideas, they could only focus on petty specific grievances. Their larger evils invariably escaped their notice. The great majority of proles did not even have telescreens in their homes. Even the civil police interfered with them very little. There was a vast amount of criminality in London. A whole world within a world of thieves, bandits, prostitutes, drug peddlers, and racketeers of every description. But since it all happened among the proles themselves, it was of no importance. In all questions of morals, they were allowed to follow their ancestral codes. The Puritanism of the party was the bleak Puritanism of the party was not imposed upon them. Promiscuity went unpunished. Divorce was permitted. For that matter, even religious worship would have been permitted if the proles had shown any sign of needing or wanting it. They were beneath suspicion. As the party's slogan put it, proles and animals are free. Hang on. Speaking of before I continue, I just want to say people are also animals. Let me explain. We're the ancestors of monkeys. Yeah, we're the ancestors of monkeys. I don't know what kind of monkeys, but like prehistoric times and stuff. We've evolved from those monkeys. And yeah, you know, like the caveman times. Those could probably be real. The caveman times. I mean, they could. They would be real. They could. They. I don't know if it's real, but I guess they are real. But let's just say it's been a very long time, and history has not really been into that yet. But I just want to say we are still in the we are still in the cycle of life. We have predators, we have prey, and by predators I do not mean that kind, but rather in the animal kind. Like you know how the big bird eat the little bird, and the little bird eat the worm. No, like the no the caterpillar eats the leaves, the bird eats the worm, the big bird ate the caterpillar, the little bird. You know what? Let's just keep going. Let's just keep going. We should. I want to read. Winston reached down and cautiously scratched his varicose ulcer. It had begun itching again. The thing you invariably came back to was the impossibility of knowing what life before the revolution had really been like. He took out of the drawer a copy of a children's history textbook, which he had borrowed from Miss Parsons, and began copying a passage into the dictionaries. In the old days, it ran, before the glorious revolution, London was not the beautiful city that we know today. It was a dark, dirty, miserable place where hardly anybody had enough to eat, and where hundreds and thousands of poor people had no boots on their feet and not even a roof to sleep under. Children no older than you had to work 12 hours a day for cruel masters who flogged themselves with whips if they worked too slowly and fed them on nothing but stale bread crusts and water. But in among all this terrible poverty, there were just a few great big beautiful houses, that were lived by rich men who had as many servants as many as 30 servants to look after them. These rich men were called the capitalists. They were fat, ugly men with wicked faces, like the one in the picture on the opposite page. You can see that he is dressed in a long black coat, which was called a frock coat, and a queer, shiny hat shaped like a stovepipe, which was called a top hat. This was the uniform of the capitalists, and no one else was allowed to wear it. Does this mean that my outfit is a capitalist? Wait, no, I'm not a capitalist. I'm not, my outfit is not capitalist. Because that's, I don't know, you know what, I just like this uniform. I was suggested to use this uniform by, I don't know who, well, by something. But, yeah, something suggested me to use this outfit. So, but this outfit turns out really great. Come on. Anyways, this was the uniform of the capitalists, and no one else was allowed to wear it. The capitalists owned everything in the world, and everyone else was their slave. They owned all the land, all the houses, all the factories, and all the money. If anyone disobeyed them, they could throw them into prison, or they could take his job away. And hang on, they could take his job away and starve him to death. When any ordinary person spoke to a capitalist, he had to cringe and bow to him, and take off his cap and address him as Sir. The chief of all the capitalists were called the king, and but here within the rest of the catalog, there would be mention of the bishops in their lawn sleeves, the judges in their ermine robes, the pillory, the stocks, the treadmill, the cat o' nine tails, the Lord Mayor's blanket, and the practice of kissing the Pope's toe. There was also something called the Jus Primae Noctis, which would probably not be mentioned in a textbook for children. Oh yeah, aren't we a teen-friendly channel? Like a 13 plus channel? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hmm. You know what? It was by law, by which every capitalist had the right to sleep with any woman working in one of his factories. How could you tell how much of it was lies? It might be true that the average human being was better off now than he had been before the revolution. The only evidence to the contrary was the mute protest in your own bones, the instinctive feeling that the conditions you lived in were intolerable, and that at some other time they must have been different. It struck him that the truly characteristic thing about modern life was not its cruelty and insecurity, but simply its bareness, its dinkiness, its listlessness. Life, if you looked about you, bore no resemblance not only to the lives that streamed out of the telescreens, but even to the ideals that the party was trying to achieve. Great areas of it, even for a party member, were natural and non-political, a matter of slogging through dreary jobs, fighting for a place on the tube, donning a worn-out not stock, sock, cadging a saturin tablet, saving a cigarette end. The ideal set up by the party was something huge, terrible, and glittering, a world of steel and concrete, of monstrous machines and terrifying weapons. That's us! A nation of warriors and fanatics, marching forward in perfect unity, all thinking the same thoughts and shouting the same slogans, perpetually working, fighting, triumphing, persecuting 300 million people, all with the same face. Their reality was decaying. Dingy cities were underfed people who shuffled to and fro in leaky shoes, in patched-up 19th century houses that smelt always of cabbage and bad lavatories. He seemed to see a vision of London, vast and ruinous city of a million dustbins, and mixed up with it was a picture of Miss Parsons, a woman with lined face and wispy hair, fiddling helplessly with a blocked waste pipe. He reached down and scratched his ankle again. Day and night the telescreens bruised your ears with statistics, proving that people today had more food, more clothes, better houses, better recreations, that they lived longer, worked shorter hours, were big, bigger, healthier, stronger, happier, more intelligent, better educated than the people of 50 years ago. Not a word of it could ever be proved or disproved, but the party claimed, for example, that today 40% of adult pros were literate. Before the revolution, it was said, the number had only been 15%. The party claimed that the infant mortality rate was now only 60 per 160 per thousand, whereas before the revolution, it had been 300, and so it went on. It's like a single equation with two unknowns. It might very well be that literally everywhere in the history books, even the things that once accepted without question, was pure fantasy. For all he knew, there might never be any such law as the jus primae noctis, or any such creature as a capitalist, or any such garme as a top hat. Everything faded into mist. The past was erased. The the er, the past was erased. The erasure was forgotten. The lie became truth. Just once in his life he had possessed after the event. That was what counted concrete, unmistakable events of an act of falsification. He had held it between his fingers for as long as 30 seconds. In 1973, it must have been at any rate. It was at about the time where he and Catherine had parted, but the reality relevant date was 7 or 8 years earlier. The story really began in the middle 60s, the period of the Great Purges in which the original leaders of the revolution were wiped out once and for all. By 1970, none of them was left, except Big Brother himself. All the rest had by that time had been exposed as traitors and counter-revolutionaries. Goldstein had fled and was hiding no one knew where, and of the others a few had simply disappeared, while the majority had been executed after spectacular public trials at which they made confession of their crimes. Among the last survivors were three men named Jones, Aronson, and Rutherford. It must have been in 1965 that these three had been arrested. As often happened, they had vanished for a year or more, so that one did not know whether they were alive or dead, and had suddenly been brought forth to incriminate themselves in the usual way. They had confessed to intelligence with the enemy, and that they too, the enemy was Eurasia. Embezzlement of public funds, the murder of various trusted party members, intrigues against the leadership of Big Brother, which had started long before the revolution happened, and acts of sabotage causing the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. After confessing to these things had been pardoned, reinstated in the party, and given posts which were in fact sinecures, but which sounded important. All three had written long, abject articles in The Times, analyzing the reasons for their defection and promising to make amends. Some time after the release, Winston had actually seen all three of them in the Chestnut Tree Cafe. He remembered the sort of terrified fascination with which he had watched them out of the corner of his eye. They were men far older than himself, relics of the ancient world, almost the last great figures left over from the heroic days of the party. The glamour of the underground struggle and the Civil War was still faintly clung to them. He had the feeling, though already at the time facts and dates were growing blurry, that he had known their names years earlier than he had known that of Big Brother. But also they were outlaws, enemies, untouchables, doomed with absolute certainty to the extinction with a year or two. No one who had once fallen into the hands of the Thought Police ever escaped in the end. They were corpses waiting to be sent back to the grave. There was no one at any of the tables nearest to them. It was not wise even to be seen in the neighborhood of such people. They were sitting in silence before glasses of the gin flavored with cloves, which was the speciality of the cafe. Of the three, it was Rutherford whose appearance had most impressed Winston. Rutherford had once been a famous caricaturist, whose brutal cartoons had helped to inflame popular opinion before and during the Revolution. Every now, at long intervals, his cartoons were appearing in the Times. They were simply an imitation of his earlier manner, and curiously lifeless and unconvincing. Always they were a rehearsing of the ancient times, ancient themes, slum treat tenements, starving children, street battles, capitalists in top hats. Even on the barricades, the capitalists still seemed to cling their top hats in an endless, hopeless effort to get back into the past. Hang on. He was a monstrous man, with a mane of greasy gray hair, his face pouched and seamed, with thick, negroid lips. What's negroid? No, what? Never mind. At one time he must have been immensely strong. Now his great body was sagging, slopping, bulging, falling away in every direction. He seemed to be breaking up before one's eyes, like a mountain crumbling. It was the lonely hour of 15. Winston could not now remember how he had come to be in the cafe at such a time. The place was almost empty. A tinny music was trickling from the telescreens. The three men sat in their corner, almost motionless, never speaking. Uncommanded, the waiter brought fresh glasses of gin. There was a chessboard on the table beside them, with the pieces set out but no game started. And then, for perhaps half a minute in all, something happened to the telescreens. The tune that they were playing changed, and the tone of the music changed too. There came into it, but it was something hard to describe. It was a peculiar, cracked, braying, jeering note. It was a peculiar, no. In his mind, Winston called it the yellow note. And then a voice from the telescreen was singing, "Under the spreading chestnut tree, I sold you and you sold me. There lie they and here lie we, under the spreading chestnut tree." The three men never stirred, but when Winston glanced at Rutherford's ruinous face, he saw that his eyes were full of tears, and for the first time he noticed with a kind of inward shudder, and yet not knowing at what he shuddered, that both Aronson and Rutherford had broken noses. A little later all three were rearrested. It appeared that they had engaged in fresh conspiracies. From the very moment of their release at their second trial, they confessed to all their old crimes all over again with a whole string of new ones. They were executed and their fate was recorded in the party history, a warning to posterity. About 5 years later, this in 1973, Winston was unrolling a wad of documents which had just been flopped out of the thing machine. Next page. Hang on. Hang on. Please don't say I have to do break time again. We're three people. Come on, we're flopped out of the. What's next? Power off and power on again. Turning on. Pages loading. Views has successfully plummeted. Pages not loading. Yep, it's time for the break time. Application error. The selected application could not be selected. Please restart. I'm very sorry for the breaks. We're back. We're back. We're back. We're back. We're back. Pneumatic tube on his desk, where he came on a fragment of paper which had evidently been slipped in among the others and then forgotten. The instant he had flattened it out, he saw its significance. It was a half page torn out of the Times about 10 years earlier. The top half of the page so that it included the date, and it contained a photograph of the delegates at some party function in New York. Prominent in the middle of group were Jones, Aronson, and Rutherford. There was no mistaking them. In any case, their names were in the caption at the bottom. The point was that at both trials, all three men had confessed that on that date they had been on Eurasian soil. They had flown from a secret airfield in Canada to a meeting place somewhere in Siberia, and had conferred with meetings of the Eurasian General Staff, to whom they had betrayed important military secrets. The date had struck in Winston's memory because it chanced to be Midsummer Day. But the whole story must be on record in countless other places as well. There was only one possible conclusion. The confessions were lies. Of course, this was not in itself a discovery. Even at that time, Winston had not imagined that the people who were wiped out in the purges had actually committed the crimes that they were accused of. But this was concrete evidence. It was a fragment of the abolished past, like a fossil bone which turns up in the wrong stratum and destroys a geological theory. It was enough to blow the party to atoms if in some way it could have been published to the world and its significance made known. He had gone straight on working. As soon as he saw what the photograph was, and what it meant, he had covered it up with another sheet of paper. Luckily, when he unrolled it, it had been upside down from the point of the view of the telescreen. He took his scribbling pad on his knee and pushed back his chair so as to get as far away from the telescreen as possible. To keep your face expressionless was not difficult, and even if your breathing could be controlled with an effort, but you could not control the breathing of your heart, and the telescreen was quite delicate enough to pick that up. He let what judged to be 10 minutes go by, tormented all the while by the fear that some accident, a sudden jot blowing across his desk, for instance, would betray him. Then, without uncovering it again, he dropped the photograph into the memory hole, along with some other waste papers. Within another minute, perhaps, would have crumbled into ashes. That was 10, 11 years ago. Today, probably he would have kept that photograph. It was curious that the fact of having held it in his fingers seemed to him to make a difference. Even now, when the photograph itself, as well as the event it recorded, was only memory, was the party's hold upon the past less strong, he wondered, because a piece of evidence which existed no longer had once existed? But today, supposing that it could be somehow resurrected from its ashes, the photograph might not even be evidence. Already, at the time when he made his discovery, Oceania was no longer at war with Eurasia, and it must have been the agents of Eastasia that the three dead men had betrayed their country. Since then, there had been other changes. Two, three, he could not remember how many. Very likely the confessions had been rewritten and rewritten until the original facts and dates no longer had the smallest significance. The past not only changed, but changed continuously. What most afflicted him with the sense of nightmare was that he had never clearly understood why the huge impostor was undertaking. The immediate advantages of falsifying the past was obvious, but the ultimate motive was mysterious. He took up his pen again and wrote, I understand how. I do not understand the why. He wondered, as he had many times wondered before, whether he himself was a lunatic. Perhaps a lunatic was simply a mere minority of one. At one time it had been a sign of madness to believe that the earth goes round the sun. Today, to believe that the past is unalterable. He might be alone in holding that belief, and if alone, then a lunatic. But the thought of being a lunatic did not greatly trouble him. The horror was that he might also be wrong. He picked up the children's history book and looked at the portrait of Big Brother, which formed its frontispiece. The hypnotic eyes gazed into his own. It was as though some huge force was pressing down upon you, something that penetrated inside your skull, battering against your brain, frightening you out of your beliefs, persuading you, almost to deny the evidence of your senses. In the end, the party would announce that 2 and 2 made 5, and you would have to believe it. It was inevitable that they should make that claim sooner or later. The logic of their position demanded it. Not merely the validity of experience, but the very existence of external reality was tacitly denied by their philosophy. The heresy of heresies was common sense, and what was terrifying was not that they would kill you for thinking otherwise, but that they might be right, for after all, how do we know that 2 and 2 make 4, or that the force of gravity works, or that the past is unchangeable? If both the past and the external would exist only in the mind, and if the mind itself is controllable, what then? But no! His cord seemed to stunnedly to stiffen of its own accord. The face of O'Brien, not called up by any obvious association, had floated into his mind. He knew, with more certainty than before, that O'Brien was on his side. He was writing the dictionary for O'Brien to O'Brien. It was like an interminable letter which no one would ever read, but which was addressed to a particular person and took its color from that fact. The party would told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. His heart sank as he thought of the enormous power arrayed against him, the ease with which any party intellectual would overthrow him in debate, the subtle arguments which he would not be able to understand, much less answer. And yet he was in the right. They were wrong, and he was right. The obvious, the silly, and the true had got to be defended. Truisms are true, hold on to that. The solid world exists. Its laws do not change. Stones are hard, water is wet, Baba is you, objects unsupported fall towards the Earth's center, with the feeling that he was speaking to O'Brien, and also that he was setting forth an important axiom. He wrote, Freedom is the freedom to say that 2 plus 2 make 4. If that is granted, all else follows. And that finishes the chapter 7 and 6, read in reverse order. I've planned that joke for a while, and I'm staying with that joke. But anyways, yeah, so chapter 8, last chapter of part 1. This is what we'll be reading, probably tomorrow, probably after tomorrow, depends on how the days goes. But anyways, chapter 8 is like the entire stream long, so yeah, big chapter for a big stream. And no breaks. No breaks at all. Speaking of breaks, I should actually probably change the video. And also, speaking of Chapter 7, I should actually make a blog post because I may have figured out something. But anyways, I'll see ya next time in